Call to order for a Watertown City Council work session for April 4th of 2023. We don't have this on the agenda, but I believe in starting every meeting with prayer. Councilman Vilhauer, would you lead us in an impromptu prayer?
I guess so. Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, as we go about this week, we are reminded of the tough decision that you made concerning your son and giving him to us that we might have a promise of eternal life. Now give us the wisdom and the courage to make decisions that are pleasing to you and for the benefit of the city. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. And we'll do the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Finance Officer Bob Zine, please call the roll.
Okay. Bueller. Here. Danforth.
Here.
Helene.
Here.
Paulson. Here. Shetty. Absent. Is he online? No? Okay.
No.
Tupper. Here. Vilhauer.
Here.
Thank you.
I did get a message from Councilman Shetty. He just wanted to say thank you very much to the council, to the staff for being very supportive and understanding at this time as he's going through a family health issue with his father. And he will not be able to attend tonight, but I did ask him if he had any questions that he wanted to make sure were addressed tonight. And we kind of laughed about that, and he said he was pretty sure that everything was going to be addressed. So, anyway, he wants to say thank you and keep up the good work, and he will see us very soon, hopefully. So, just wanted to say that. I'll make a motion, or I will accept a motion to approve the agenda. Motion made by Councilman Vilhauer, second by Councilman Bueller. Any conversation on that? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Okay. At a city council work session, if you haven't been to one before, this is a chance. This is not a typical city council meeting. We do not have a public hearing. This is for the council to basically work with each other to ask questions, have a discussion, and the goal for tonight is to come forward with some clear next steps as far as what the council is going to direct the staff to do in regards to the project that we are discussing, that is on our agenda. So that is the intent, is for the council to have this discussion, bring forward any questions. I will have one stipulation, and that is I'm going to ask the council and I'm going to direct the conversation to be, once a topic is brought up, we are going to stay on that topic until some sort of an agreement is reached. We cannot vote at a work session, so there will be no votes tonight. But I think that there will be some level of understanding as far as what the consensus of the council is. So rather than be on one topic and then branch off onto other tangents of that same topic, I want to keep it on one topic until that is agreed upon, and then we can move on to the other. If you want to mention something, I will write it down and we can get back to it. Other than that, the format for tonight is going to be way more informal than what I normally run at a work session. I'm going to allow a very conversational tone, almost as if we're just around a table having coffee, and it's just discussion. So I am going to allow actual interplay between two council people, but of course, as always, I ask it to be very respectful. Use the title of the person that you're addressing, and keep on topic and not personal. So, and yes, and then next Tuesday is going to be a public presentation of the city council presentation again for more for more feedback at that point. With that said, we have one item on tonight's agenda, a city hall and street facility discussion, and we will start with our city manager, Amanda Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a very brief presentation, if you will, condensed from what we've presented the last two meetings, just to set the conversation up. We have multiple opportunities in front of us as it relates to the City Hall and street facility projects. We, as staff, have been tasked with providing information to you all on what are best alternatives or best options for both of those projects. We can get into as much detail as you like about Wells Fargo, street facility, combined facility. We have all of that information at our disposal tonight. If you recall from the last conversations, we talked about the Wells Fargo renovation, a standalone street facility, and we ended the conversation with a city services center discussion, which would be housed out at Highway 20. So with that, Heath and I will stand by for questions. Like I said, we have the presentation from the last two meetings available that we can pull up if you want to refer to any specific information. But Heath, Kristen, myself, Pete's here from IT, Rob with the street division, Marcy with engineering. I think Justin's online as well. And really, we're just intending to step back and answer questions and provide information as you request. So I don't know if you want anything more formal than that from us. We're happy to provide it at this time, or if you want to get into the meat of it, we'll plan accordingly.
That's it?
I don't know. What do you want? Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
I thought there'd be at least a slide or two.
Oh, well. Do you want to pull the slides up there, Heath, please?
Yeah.
There's a slide. How's that? Sharing my screen on Teams there. Is that coming through? Okay. Yeah, so this is really the presentation from not only the public open house on March 9th, but also the previous meeting with the city council. I forget the date prior to that, in the end of February. And the only thing different about the presentation tonight was just to gloss over a few of the details. We gave a little bit of history of the City Hall building, how we'd contemplating building a new one sometime back, 2016, 2019. We had some history there in both those years. Put time, money, and effort into some design and siting. Then, of course, landed on the Wells Fargo building, or that purchase for that site. This slide here is pretty telling, and we'll maybe refer to it off and on throughout the evening, where it gives what our cost estimate was for construction of the remodel, and the red values being the actual bid that was received for that remodel. The bottom line, it came in $2.4 million over the estimate. This slide too is just as equally important, gives the overall for the project. We were sitting on a little over $6 million overall estimate going into the bid. The results were, the facts of the numbers became almost $8.7 million. So that caused us to pump the brakes, push pause, hit the drawing board, see what else would be feasible. We started by saying, okay, what could we pull out of the Wells Fargo to get those numbers down? That list is outlined on this slide and includes several things from lighting to the fire suppression system to new roofing being the asphalt shingles, not the sheeting and everything on the roof, but just the shingles. Pulling out some of the alternates, like a new council chambers, which was going to be a separate building of its own, connected to the existing structure. Bottom line is we were looking at pulling $2.5 to $3 million out of there, but then we started looking at what do we be left with if we pull that out. And that's, again, where we decided it just didn't make sense to proceed with this bid because of what we were cutting the project short of, as opposed to what the initiatives of this project were in the beginning. So then we also provided a background on the street maintenance facility. The street division, of course, is one of 6 of Public Works and a very critical one in the city. And they're operating out of a shoebox right now, I'd like to call it informally. Rob's here tonight, street superintendent. He can help answer questions with me throughout the evening as related to the street facility needs as they might get discussed. We've talked about the street facility for some time too. and gave a little bit of timeline and some site exploration that we did. Every one of these red flags was considered at one point or another over the last decade on where we could land a new street facility. We landed it, of course, with some property that we purchased out on Highway 20, the old Stockyards land, right on the curve there, just across the street, kind of northwesterly of the zoo, also city property, of course. We've entered into a design contract with RJM to design a new street facility, with JLG. We've also entered into a construction contract with RJM to be our construction manager at risk. With that project delivery method, that construction manager gets plugged in early on in the design process, so there's some value-added engineering throughout the design phase. So those two are under contract right now to design and build a street facility for us. We shared a lot of numbers on the estimates for a street facility, and for and then again a summary of that 8.6, nearly 8.7 million for the Wells Fargo remodel, and then the total costs for those two projects were summarized here. Again, after that bid with Wells Fargo and after where we were at in the process with the street facility, we started wondering, what does building new look like combining these two facilities, having some economy of scale to add a city hall or a city administration building with the street maintenance facility. And we had JLG, our architect, put together some renditions for us, what that could look like. We provided them the space needs that we knew and had on hand from the Wells Fargo remodel and our current structure that we're in now. We also provided them the space needs for the street facility, for the heated storage, the main vehicle and equipment heated storage building, and then also some ancillary structures that would be out back of this site that would help house additional functions of the street maintenance division of Public Works. Again, looking at that location along Highway 20 for a combined city complex. These are some preliminary building layouts that were generated up front here. Of course, right along the highway, we'd want our shining star or diamond in the out front here of the admin building, with appropriate landscaping and beautification efforts here to front Highway 20, and then out back as we progress further into the site. Of course, we would transition into more of the work area of the city street functions. Just an alternate layout that was developed there. Then we started looking at what that would look like as a project from a cost standpoint and how we would fund it. So we worked with, of course, closely with Kristen, our finance officer, and the city manager, our architects, and our construction manager. I want to point out it's a unique relationship between the architect and our CMAR. The CMAR is kind of the boots on the ground folks. They're the stuff that cranks this kind of construction out day in and day out, every year, year in and year out. And so these numbers that we have they are estimates. I mean, we're not even halfway into design, so these are just preliminary estimates, but we feel that they're good ones that give us some cushion, some breathing room, so that as we progress, if we were to progress into a design of a joint complex or even a standalone street facility, we feel like we're working with some good numbers here based on the collaboration between our architect and our construction manager. The bottom line is that we put together a fiscal phasing plan for a joint complex where we have 2023 money. We're coming into the budget season already for 2024, so in that budget season we would allocate additional funds that would be needed. Again, subsequently in 2025 and 2026, and phase this in financially, but also as it makes sense to progress with the structure construction on the site. You'll note the total building expense here is just under $28 million for a joint complex. This is that earlier spreadsheet that I shared about the Wells Fargo remodel and the street facility built separately at that $30 million, and then the combined project at 29.1. See about a $900,000 difference between the two.
Can you blow that up?
Sorry, you bet.
Heath, a request was made to email this slide to the council
Okay.
so that we can refer to it during the meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can, let me get out of presentation mode, and then I'm kind of seeing more what. Can you do that? Thank you. Pull this out of the way, and then I'm seeing exactly what you're seeing, so when I'm scrolling, it makes sense. So the top half of this spreadsheet is, again, the combined facility. Yeah, sorry, just kind of get my bearings here. 29.1 million for the combined facility. The street facility cost at a little over 21. City Hall portion at 7.7. This is all in for construction costs, taxes, excise taxes that we're responsible to pay, the design contingencies, construction contingencies. This is all in costs here that we can budget this for. The bottom half, again, is the comparison of a separate street facility. Again, that cost remains the same, about 21.4. The main difference here is the difference between adding the adding the city hall into the new construction versus remodeling Wells Fargo. There again is at 8.6, nearly 8.7 million number based on the bids that were received last year. Overall cost difference. So with that, we did have a timeline here too that we've already snuck a little bit past. If we were to move forward with an amendment to the design contract with JLG, staff would prefer to do that as expeditiously as possible, and that's not to hurry this project along. The reason for that is we were working on a timeline with a standalone street facility, and like I've described, we pressed the brakes on that with our consultants and with our CMAR. My concern is if this decision-making drags on too long, what we're going to do is we're going to push the bid for this facility, whether it's a standalone street maintenance facility or whether it's a combined facility. We're going to end up pushing that bid out of our optimal bid season. That optimal bid season is late next fall and into next winter. So if we push this off 2, 3, 6 months, we're going to blow through that bid season. We're going to be sitting in the middle of 2024, and as we all know, the more we put off bids and the more we delay things like that, the prices are likely going to continue to escalate. So that's why we as staff are just time sensitive to this. We've already delayed the standalone street facility quite a few months, and we just want to be expeditious as we can with our decision making. That's not to press the council into making a whim decision by any means. We're hopeful that we brought a lot of good information forward and that we can help make an educated decision that's right for the community of Watertown. There's a couple slides in here that we can refer to again later on if we need to, but it really showed the layout of what additional debt would look like to the tune of about $5 to $6 million in a bond. That's what's estimated that would be needed in order to carry out this project. I want to say, not with any level of great detail, but the fact is if we do 2 standalone facilities, if we do a combined facility, if we choose to just do the street facility and pump the brakes on City Hall, any one of those 3 scenarios, we're going to need a bond, and I think our finance officer is going to nod in agreement with me. We simply don't have the cash on hand and the resources to pull this all together without some level of bonding. So I just want to make that point early in the meeting. Kristen may have also worked some numbers here earlier today that we can share throughout the discussion as that comes up. But that bond was laid out in a graphical manner here to show how it affects the current layout versus adding that 5-year. And I think it pushed our target back by 2 years, went from 2029 at being 40% debt to revenue out to 2031 to be 40% debt to revenue. A lot of factors in this spreadsheet that is, I want to say and emphasize that Kristen put the spreadsheet together and very conservatively. There's money in here that's likely money we're not going to have to spend because we have donations, fundraising for the ice arena, for example. But I'll leave that kind of parked there for now, and we can revisit these numbers later if we need to. And then we talked about some of the benefits of a combined facility and then some of the realities of where we're at. Yeah, these two facilities are two of the what we call the final city government buildings needs that we'll have for quite some time. There are some other service type structures like the clubhouse at the golf course, maybe some additional ancillary buildings at the zoo, but more of a service building that's being provided, or that's providing a service to a user group that's paying fees to be part of that. But these are the government buildings that perform a function in serving the entire community that we're referring to here. And the street maintenance facility in City Hall are really two of the last ones that are in need of updating or renovating. We had a new wastewater admin building here the last few years. We've, of course, built a new airport terminal. We broke ground on a new ice arena. Got a lot of good, exciting projects done and over with, and a couple in the works. And these two, staff is pretty excited to see both of these proceed in some capacity and help to any extent that we can to get them across the finish line for the community of Watertown. With that, that was really the slideshow. And again, this is the entire slideshow that was presented at the last two meetings, one at the council meeting and then one at a public meeting. And we can pull up any information out of here, and then the staff is available to help answer any questions regarding the Wells Fargo bid or any other details about the street facility.
One word of warning to the council, please no side conversations. If one person has the floor, that person can be asked a question, but please no side conversations. It's distracting and makes it harder for us to hear, harder for the people in the audience to know precisely what is being discussed. Councilman Tupper raised his finger to ask to speak. I do have two questions to ask the council, but if you had a question to ask Keith regarding the presentation, you may do so.
Just one quick question, Director Von Eye. With those numbers you're showing us, that's all in numbers, or estimated all in numbers. That includes the purchase of the land and everything, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I would like to ask the council a question just right off the bat, and that is, we have two items being discussed here, a street facility and a city hall, that have been identified as a need for the city of Watertown. That doesn't necessarily mean that we were all on the council when they were identified as a need. So my first question is just to make sure that we are in agreement that these are two items that we would like to see addressed. Is anyone in a disagreement to that we would like to see a solution for these two topics? Councilman Vilhauer?
Thank you. Maybe a more appropriate answer is, do we perceive one as being more pressing than the other? Because in my opinion, they're both very much needed, but maybe we as a council feel that one might be more pressing than the other.
That is true, and I can write that down for a conversation at a later time, but that would, I guess the question is even if you do prioritize one over the other, which I think all of us would in our own minds, regardless of what that is, even the one that you would rank number 2, would you identify that as still something you would like to solve? I guess that's what I want to come in agreement with. Yes. Okay. Second question, I just want to make sure that we're all in agreement that if a solution can be found, that now is the time to do so. Councilman Danforth?
I think you have to qualify that with what the numbers are and what the plan is.
Well, and that's what we're here to
I'm
discuss.
just saying, to answer the question and say yes, for me is a hard one because I still have a lot of questions. I see personally, Mayor, the street department as a higher priority. And if it was going to be a standalone street department, I do agree we need to do something with City Hall, but in my opinion, that could go down the road a little bit. So it's hard for me to answer your question I think we need both, but to answer yes to your question would be a difficult one for me to say that we need to do them both, because the question is when and at what cost.
Well, actually, we're here to ask these difficult questions tonight. So as long as Councilman Vilhauer mentioned it and you said so, let's have it out. Let's have it out for the public. We have 2 topics under discussion. Which one would you prioritize? I will just say, in my mind, street department is clear. I believe that's where the public would be at because they drive on roads every day and not everyone comes into City Hall every day. I'm just saying that's where I would think the street department, in my mind, I'm not saying that has to be anyone else's. Would anyone else like to say anything? Councilman Vilhauer.
I guess I would say that I agree the public might agree with you, Mayor, and I see some nodding of the heads up here. But I am also concerned, we have been talking about the City Hall project I've been on the council for 8 years, and we've been talking about it. We took some concrete steps almost 3 years ago when we bought the Wells Fargo building. And for the sake of the staff and the working conditions, safety issues, et cetera, I don't want to minimize the need for the City Hall project. So I just want to get that out there for the sake of our staff and the public, because we serve the public as well, obviously, out of that building too, that the City Hall to me is a very important project, in my mind, probably the same as the street department building.
Councilman Tupper.
I would have a hard time prioritizing one over the other because, yes, I agree. I mean, the street department's been needed to be into a new facility many, many years ago, but I also look at somewhat what Councilman Vilhauer just said, that how many people from the public actually walk in the street department? Hardly any. Hardly many people walk into City Hall. Well, that's getting less and less every day. We do have more staff that works at City Hall that are at the building all day long. And I think we've all recognized the building isn't functional to where it should be. You know, like anybody could get into that elevator and run around the building all day long and we wouldn't even know they're here. There's some mold issues in the basement. You know, I look at that as a safety issue for our staff. So I would have, you know, I think they're both very, very important. I would have a hard time determining which, but I guess I would probably have to lean to City Hall before I would the street department, but very, very close to each other. So,
And I'd just like to clarify, by no means am I saying that I don't want City Hall. I mean, I prize our employees and I want to find a solution for both. That is one of the big deciding factors as to why I feel how I feel on this topic. Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'm going to say street facility. I did work in City Hall. I know that this building has its issues. It needs to, but it is functioning. Whereas our street facility, we have millions and millions of dollars of equipment sitting outside, getting eroded by the elements, whether that be the extreme cold or the extreme heat, every single day. So that really concerns me, and as assets go, you know, I want to protect those, and so they can better serve the public, so we have less downtime with our equipment and stuff like that. So that's why I would say street facility, but City Hall is pretty high as well. Like, I mean, I think we're all in agreement they're both needed, but that's my reason why I would choose street facility.
Thank you. Councilman Danforth?
Just a little sidebar. It really probably has some bearing, but not a significant bearing on my prioritization anyway. Because as I stated, to me it's the street department. Because one of the reasons there is that I know that LATC is looking for an area to expand to. And I was asked that question 2 weeks ago by our new president, if it looked like that we were going to have the new street department, and should they be counting on that land for their future expansion, because they put their plans in place now for years out. So that is an issue. It is probably the one thing that really, for me, took me from being on the edge of whether I thought it was a high priority to being a priority, because we really got two entities now. We got the street department that really should benefit from this, but we're also helping the other significant part of our community with LATC. So,
All right, thank you. I would like to give the entire council a chance for what I will call opening remarks, both as a way to say anything that you feel important and also to spur conversation, because anything that you say, if it's a concern, it's a question, I can write it down and we can get back to it later. So you by no means have to say anything, but if you would like to, now is your time to do so. All right. Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I would just like to say that Heath, Director Von Nye referenced this several times as far as how we got to this point. And I think the perception out there in the public that we sprung something totally out of the blue on them last month or whenever that was. I mean, this is something, I mean, we rejected the Wells Fargo bid that was done in a public setting. We directed the staff that, hey, go back and give us some options now, and they have done that, working behind the scenes. I mean, at some point we need to roll it out to the public, but by no means, and that's what was done at our previous meetings. But at no means have we reached a decision point. I mean, the first decision point that I think we're being asked to make is extending JLG's contract, but that is only one step of many that we will be needing to go through. So it's not at all as far as the final decision. I received an email over the course of the last few weeks that the trains left the station. Well, no, that's not the case. We have a lot of decision points to make yet as we go through this process. And those decisions will be made in a public setting.
Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I've said this at the last public hearing about this too, that, we do cherish the feedback of the public and especially the business owners downtown regarding City Hall. I've gotten a lot of feedback personally. I'm sure the rest of the council has, and that obviously weighs heavily into this discussion, and this isn't going in blindly. It's not making a rash decision. Like Councilman Vilhauer said just a little bit ago, he's been here 8 years, and he's talked about it every single year of those 8. And it's time to move forward, one direction or another. I mean, that's where we're at, and the public's feedback is more important than our own personal feelings. So, and that's who we represent as everyone in this community. And, I just want to make that clear that this isn't a light decision by any means, the street facility or City Hall. This is a lot of money we're talking about. $28 million is a lot. We just went through it with the ice arena. We have big projects, but once we get these done, this is going to be huge for this community, and we won't need anything really new for a long time after this. So
Councilman Beeler.
Thanks, Mayor. I've been involved with this project for a while, and obviously been on the council for many years now, I guess, and it has been on the horizon. I think we've had issues with this building for all of that time. It's easy. It'd be easy for me to just say, well, let's just build it out there. Let's forget about it, get it done, take the cost, move it out there, and put it over there by Highway 20. It'd be easy to do. I mean, we can do that. But I was involved with I'll just focus first of all on the bank building. I was involved with that project from day one. Glenn, you were part of that as well. You and I both sat with the architects and the design and all that we went through, which is how long ago now? 2.5 years? 2.5 years ago. And honestly, if we bought the building, the intent was to move in there. The intent was to remodel that building. And, at 0 hour, we had people coming around saying, hey, we'd like to buy this property from you. So things got delayed, put out. At the same time, inflation just starts taking off on what we could do. Because honestly, to be honest with you guys, we could have been, and I know this is what could have been, but we could have been in that building already, and for a lot less money. But my concern is down the road, we got to look ahead a little bit. What we're spending for this
If it's the right thing to do, it's the right thing to do. But we got to look ahead at what we're going to spend. That ice arena costs us a hell of a lot more money than we had earlier anticipated. I mean, like twice as much as we anticipated 4 years ago. And then we can't overlook the idea that we got to put an East Fire Station in at some point. That's got to happen. And that's a public safety issue. I'm not opposed. I think we absolutely need a street department. Poor Rob back there is the red-haired stepchild for this thing, which, by the way, I was one of those, a red-haired stepchild. No, they've needed a facility for a long, long time, and we do have millions of dollars worth of equipment that sits outside and rusts and corrodes, and it's just not good. In the long run, it costs the city a lot of money, and it's not a good, healthy work environment for those folks that work at the street department. And the fact that we got to heat those things up all the time in the winter time and breaking hydraulic, it goes on and on. But they're both important to me. I can't say one over the other at this point, because our staff definitely deserves a good place to work, and some place where we've got good workflow. That's important as well, I think. But when I look at these projects and I look at the city hall, it comes up, the location becomes an issue as well. I mean, there are people in our community that really feel strongly about, there are some that don't, but a lot of folks feel strongly that we need to have our city hall downtown. And me personally, as Bruce Bueller, I would like to see that. I'd like to see our city hall stay downtown if we could do that. I'm not, because of all the time that we spent, and Reed, you might have to cut me off here, buddy, but
no, go for it.
Because of all of the time that we spent in the architects, and we've paid those fees for the architects for TSP to work with us on this project, and there was a lot of staff hours that went into this work, into this facility as well, into the design and the flow and so forth, to build that, to redo the Wells Fargo building. Because of that, I think we really need to still take a hard look at that facility. And folks, if I'm not married to the Wells Fargo building, I do like the location. Frankly, I love the building. I think it's a great stately location. I just think it looks like a city hall. The bones are good in that building. I've been in the rafters on that building. I've looked at the HVAC systems with different people. It's a good, strong building. Is it going to last another 100 years? Probably not. But I think it would be doing a disservice to the community from a cost standpoint not to look at this one more time, look at some potential value engineering. And Heath, I know when you talk about value engineering, you talked about, okay, let's take out the city hall structure that we were going to add on and take out the enclosure for the vehicles. But the main building itself, we went from a $2 million estimate to a $3.45 million bid. I personally think, and somebody can argue with me, but I personally think that the environment for that bid was poor timing. I don't know how many bids they got from the subs, but I think it was done hastily, not by anybody here. I'm not pointing at fingers at anyone here, but I think it was done hastily. I think the bids came in extremely high because of a lot of its timing. There's no doubt about it. And I think we got to think about that too when we move forward, when we're looking at building out there, if we go that direction, in which I'm not totally opposed to if it makes sense money-wise, but if we do that, if we do move out there, I think it's going to add a lot of time to getting this done compared to what we'd have to do to remodel. And I can see that inflation would continue, and I think we'd see higher costs than what we're projecting at this point in time moving forward. But all I would like to see is just that we vet this out properly and that we don't spend a tremendous amount of time, but we vet this out where we look at the Wells Fargo building and we say, we value engineered it. Here's what it's going to take, $100,000 here. It's not going to move the needle a lot maybe, but a couple $100,000 here, move it. Then rebid it. Then give it another shot. See if we get some good, responsible bids on this project. If they come back bad, okay. Then we definitely have to look at going the other direction. But personally, I like the building. I like the location of the building. The bones are good in that building. I really absolutely believe that. And so I'd like to make sure that we do vet that out as best we can. And then one other comment I'll make that, and this is in regards to the street facility. We had a consultant in here, this has been several months ago now. Dick Strasberg, who is our owner's rep that we've worked with on, well, Mike and I worked with Dick on the Wellness Center, and we worked with him on, we're working with him currently on the ice arena. And he had mentioned that there was a consultant that he recommended to us that we discuss that facility with. He came in, Heath, we spent time with him, you and I and Justin, and this guy is like the guru of street facilities. And I don't know that we've employed him or looked at moving forward with this fellow to hook up with JLG to work with them, but I think it really made sense to me that person could help us a lot in how we set that place up. And one other thing I'll just mention too, in the design, I think we got to look very closely at some sort of a sump system. And I don't want to get into all the details, but a sump system which could be fairly expensive so that we can mix salt and sand as it comes inside the building versus having it like we do it now, dump it out on the parking lot and take a loader and mix it up on the parking lot. I think that there are some of those things that I think we need to look at moving forward with that design on the street department. But yeah, I'm all for the street department, and I definitely think we need to move forward on a city hall. But I just want to make sure that we vet this facility out after we value engineer it a little bit, take another walk through. Because folks, I've been through it, and when I walk through that place and I talk to the folks that are telling us what we need to do, which was TSP. I walk through and I look around and I go, how in the hell could you spend $3.45 million on that, to do that? It just doesn't make sense to me at all. And to tell us we need a new roof. I don't know that we need a new roof. Do we need a new electrical panel? Some folks say we probably don't. The panel worked fine over there up to now. I mean, just some of those things that I think we need to consider. But that's my little beginning rant on this whole thing.
So we will definitely get back into the discussion on doing a hard look at the bid for the Wells Fargo building. Would anyone else like to have an opening comment? My opening comment is simple. I hope that people know with me as mayor, I like to get things done. The projects that have long been hanging over the head of Watertown, I like getting them done because it's what's best for the community. And if one thing has been proven, nothing is more costly than waiting. And so I'm about getting things done. We're as close as we have ever been for a solution on both of these projects. I would love to see them both, to find a way to get both, and that's where I'm at. So with that, I do have a couple preliminary questions or base questions just so that we're all in agreement, you know, kind of like, are we all in agreement that we want to see these? One question that I did have, it has not been prevalent, but let's address the location of the street department. Rob or Heath or Amanda, is this a good location for a street department? City Manager Mack?
Highway 20, is that what you're asking?
Yeah,
for the
the
street
Highway 20.
division? Yes, and that site was thoroughly vetted by numerous people. The best reason that it is a great site for that is that it is centrally located within the city limits. So when we deploy plow trucks and equipment, we're not driving through residential neighborhoods to get to where we need to go. We have access right off the highway. We spend a lot of time around the lake, and it's much more accessible. We do have a slide on here of other sites that were considered, and we worked with our architect to help vet those sites. What are the pros? What are the cons? What are the costs that would be associated with those sites, either to bring them up to appropriate grades, purchasing, whatever. And ultimately, staff made the recommendation for Highway 20 largely because of its central location to the community, and council approved the purchase of that land last year at some point in time.
And I know at previous meeting, it has been listed that it has advantages as well as in getting deployment and speed to the community, faster snow removal, things like that.
Yeah, its proximity to the county shop also is very advantageous. We do a lot of shared things with them. We don't share facilities, but that natural proximity is good. Additionally, being across the street from the park maintenance shop provides a lot of value as well. There's a lot of crossover and shared equipment, employees. We do a lot of collaboration within our organization. So there's a lot of benefit to that particular location.
And I know, and I ask this question, we have already vetted this location and at many public meetings, and the council has voted for it, but I know that some in the community have thrown into question the location of the street department because of the broadened discussion with City Hall also being there. So I just wanted to set the base that we are all in agreement that this is a good location for a street department, correct? Yeah. I'm just saying street part. I'm not asking for anything else. Yeah, okay. I just want to make that clear because I don't want anyone in the community saying that we want the street department out there because we're trying to find a way to sneak City Hall in there or vice versa. So, okay. I also have a question for the council. In the presentation that Director Von Eye gave us, he gave us the numbers. Now, I understand Councilman Bueller's concern regarding the bid for Wells Fargo. And we will look into, and we will have that discussion about that bid and if whether or not it was accurate. But my question to the council is that bid did come in. That is the only number that we know for sure that was offered to us. The numbers that were presented by Director Von Eye, are we all in agreement that they are accurate? I mean, as far as like, no, I'm not saying that you can argue that the bid could be lowered if we rebid it, but that was the bid we received. Correct? Yes. Okay. Yeah. That was the bid we received. So yes, that's the number that we are operating under. If that number doesn't change, again, we're going to talk about the rebid. If that number doesn't change, the joint facility is roughly $1 million cheaper, right? Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, based upon estimates, of course. So just want to clarify that. So
When you say that the joint facility is $1 million cheaper,
go ahead and speak into the microphone.
it's cheaper than the Wells Fargo remodel.
It is less expensive to do them together than it would be to do them separate.
Okay, but we don't know what a standalone city hall would be not included with
For a
the street
brand new
department.
city hall, is
Right.
that what you're asking?
That's the one element that we don't know.
Saying a brand new city hall?
Well, yeah, that's what we're getting there, and we'd have a modified version of that here. Going back to the plan that was brought up years ago, right? At the former Elks facility, for example. When that was brought up, that really came to the forefront primarily because there was discussion with the county on what was it? The police, not police, but the jail combination with the city hall. So county, city offices at that time. That's why that really came to the forefront. That's why that design was brought up. So, that is the third piece to this, and that is Wells Fargo, joint out there, or standalone. And what that number looks like, I have no idea. But,
Mr. Mayor,
so,
oh, sorry.
Director Von Eye?
With Councilman Danforth done, I apologize. I do have that estimate. Months ago, during the bid evaluation, we had laid that as one of the options on a spreadsheet we had put together. I've got a slide up that again just shows the combined facility versus the street facility in Wells Fargo. If you take this combined facility, the city hall number, the 7.7, you can add about $2 million to that if you pull this part of the building out of the street facility and go build it on its own. Roughly $2 million. It could push to $3 million, but the reason for that is you lose your economy of scales of sharing walls and sharing parking lots and sharing HVAC systems and sharing all these things. So when we estimated that as a standalone, we were looking at pushing about $10 million, roughly $2 million over the cost of adding it to the street facility.
All right, thank you.
Good.
Councilman Beeler, is it on this topic, or?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Quick question. When you asked that question, the saving $1 million, is that after we did the value engineering considerations? Or is that prior to that?
So the numbers as they are based off of the bid that we received.
Okay. Which does not include the value engineering?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
We can go into a topic, but one topic that Councilman Danforth brought up is one that I have always questioned about this topic, the City Hall topic, is building new downtown. And I guess I'm confused because there has been several times where I have brought downtown locations to the council, and they have been shot down because I was told that the fear of building would be too expensive. And that's why, and granted, that was at a time when we did not know how much renovation was going to cost. But I brought forward several locations where we could have built City Hall downtown, and it went nowhere because everyone said, except for me, that it was going to be too expensive to build new. And I let me rephrase. I don't want to exaggerate. Not everyone. The concern was raised that it would be too expensive to build new. And that's why it did not go anywhere. But other locations downtown have been proposed, and they have been stopped, or they have not gone anywhere. So I'm willing to have that conversation because I have always wanted it. I have always preferred a downtown location. I have worked very hard to find some. I can't say the locations that have been proposed because we don't own them. But go ahead, Councilman Beeler.
Well, you know, I know we've been involved with looking at locations for a long time, and I will say I don't believe I ever said personally, and I don't recall anybody here that said we couldn't afford to build a new facility. I don't remember saying that. Does anybody else remember saying we couldn't afford to build a new facility at some point?
Oh, good.
Bruce, I would tend to agree with the mayor that we had those discussions, and we, you know, keep in mind when these discussions were taking place, when these discussions were going on, when the ice arena was doing this almost every day. I wanted to stop talking about it because every time we talked about it, the price went up. So then all of a sudden, at that time, we were talking about when we made the commitment to buy the land where the street department most likely will go, if we agree on that, we were talking about an $8.5 million project. I think I'm looking at $20 million now, aren't I? So this noose just keeps getting tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter around our neck. So that discussion, Mayor, you're right. We talked about some, but at the time, when we looked at dollars, we said, we can't afford a 8 or 10. We don't have the money. We weren't considering any bonding at that time. We had kind of put the limit and said, we're not in favor of bonding anymore, but we are. So that's kind of the element that's changed. And I'm still not saying that's the right thing to do. I'm saying that's a piece that should get looked at. That's all I'm saying. It's not 2 pieces, it's 3 pieces. Because if we want to pay $1 million more, if it really is only $2 million more to get a whole new facility and it's down here and we can get that to work, wherever that is, then that should be a consideration. Maybe we eke up the bonding that much more if that's what we want, if that's what it takes. I do agree. It was, when those things were all going on, there were a lot of wheels moving that we went, holy smokes, we can't afford that. So I agree.
And in Councilman Villar, you wanted to say something, but I wanted to just add, yes, there were a lot of moving parts and a lot of escalating costs going on back then, but we are facing the same thing now, a year later, and the costs, and look at where we're at. We're at a situation where if we had moved a year earlier, it would have been cheaper than what we're facing now. So again, again, that's not to look back, we're looking forward. But I also do want to say, just to hopefully make myself feel better, but City Manager Mack was sitting here nodding because she did hear the same thing that Councilman Danforth and I heard, which was, no one said it's like we don't have the money, but the conversation was stopped because of money.
I think there was just a general concern that all new construction on a site that we don't currently own would be out of reach. Perhaps that is something that you want to explore. I will say that wasn't ever a direction that we were given as we were pulling information together, so it wasn't intentionally left out. It just wasn't the direction we were given. We can go get that information if that's what this body desires.
And that's where it was, because when I brought forward locations, the will of the council was not to give staff any direction to go pursue that. So it wasn't the staff's fault. That was the decision made. Councilman Billauer, I'm sorry about that.
Well, I'm not sure if I have a whole lot new to add to that, but I do remember, I mean, we kept circling back. I mean, as we were looking at other options, we kept circling back that, hey, the Wells Fargo site is the makes the most sense to pursue that. And that's what we finally, as a collective body, decided to do, is we're going to move forward with the Wells Fargo. And that's when we eventually went out for bids. And then it's when the bids came in that, I got to say personally, that was a game changer for me. When the bids came in, coupled with the same conversation then, with the conversation that started with the street department, that as far as the combined facility, I got to back up. Boy, I tell you what, I was so frustrated 2 years ago when we were so close to going out for bids and getting this project done with the Wells Fargo building. I was very, very frustrated, and I think those of you that are sitting up here were aware of that. And because I was with you, Bruce, all the way until the bids came in, and then we started talking about a combined facility and what that could possibly mean. That's when I had a change of heart on this. But as to your point, Mayor, every time we started talking about different site, we kept circling back that, hey, what we've got as far as the Wells Fargo building makes the most sense until it went out for bids.
We are on the topic of a different downtown location. Does anyone else have anything that they'd like to say on that? I mean, I don't want to hog the microphone. This is actually part of this topic that I feel very passionate about, because as I think everyone knows, I have worked on this for a long time to find a different downtown location. As far as giving guidance to staff to find a different location now, I would have a very hard time pursuing that, because most of the locations that would be viable we don't own. So to stop the progress that we have now, to stop either Wells Fargo or the combined facility now, to try to purchase land, come to an agreement, do all that, we don't know if that agreement could be made, and we don't know what that would be, and we don't know how long it would take. So I can't, in good faith, now go back in time and say to look at one of those locations that we don't own. And as far as locations that we do own, which would basically be this location, the City Auditorium, the old Elks lot. If we take away the old Elks lot, that conversation was had, then we're taking away a lot of parking. If we tear down the auditorium, you're looking at a tear down cost of potentially $700,000 to $1 million. That was just very base estimate that we had. It's also a historic site. And you would also have some people who would be in opposition of tearing it down. The current City Hall, tearing it down, has also been discussed. You have the added tear down cost, and then you would also have added cost because we would have to basically, excuse me, there's not enough room for the facility that we want unless we build up. And if we build up, then the costs also go up. Is that correct? On the current footprint. Now, we could bleed over a little bit, but that also is very questionable as far as if it has the space needed, from what I understand. Preliminarily. So I'm okay with it. As I've said, I've always tried to find a solution downtown. At this point, to say, let's find a new location and turn down either Wells Fargo or the new combined facility, I would have a hard time moving that, because there's just too many unknowns. Because you start tearing this down, who knows, you find asbestos. Same thing with the auditorium. You take away parking, then at the Elks lot, you don't know what the outcome would be, and you know that it would take time. So I don't know. If anyone is in a disagreement with me, that's fine. Councilman Tupper?
Just a quick comment on that, and I'll have to totally agree with you, because if we go back and we look at the original ice arena site where we wanted to build it, which was right out next to Premier Softball Field, and then we went to another location and another location and another location. That original location was going to be about $12 million to build, and we're at $36 million. So every time you switch a location, look what it cost you, you know. So I would, back when you were talking about different location downtown, you don't know how many times I drove around downtown and tried to vision that, you know, where could it be? I looked at every possible location it'd be, and I could never come up with a solution that I felt comfortable bringing back to the council. So I'm not, you know, I'm not loving the idea of moving it from downtown, but it may be our only solution. So,
Councilman Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. I do agree with you. I remember many conversations of potential locations. You know, and the only one that really made sense downtown, other than the current location in Wells Fargo, was the Elks lot. And really, to make that work, you almost had to tear down the auditorium, and that's been a non-starter. I mean, there's a lot of people in the public that seem to think that is an important piece of our history, and you know, that would have been a battle in itself. And I agree. I think we're to the two locations that we have picked. I think it's either Wells Fargo or with the street facility. I don't think looking at different locations, because like you said, we don't own the land, and we've gone through this iteration after iteration, and like I've said before, it's time to move forward.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I'm at, is my level of frustration about not finding a different location downtown is extremely high and has been ongoing for over a year now. But we have two possible options here, and it's as close as we've ever been. So I guess as far as like a new downtown location that Councilman Danforth brought up, does anyone want to pursue that? Yeah, Councilman Danforth.
Isn't it possible what we could do? I really don't know what our true need is, square footage wise, for a city hall. I really don't. You know, there's been some, and I know Amanda Mack has said, you know, we need to really kind of look at our organization and where do people best fit. I don't know that. You know, where do we have space that's available? Again, I don't know that either. And those are all things that really can be looked at. But when the bottom side of that whole thing, the end result is what do we really need for size in regards to a city hall? If we have that number, and I don't know what that is, JLG has just used, they've not gotten into any detail, high-level detail. They're using types of space and square footage estimates. Couldn't they do that for a fictitious city hall? To say, look, if they know what's all going to go in it, may not know exactly, but if we tell them it's 10,000 square feet, I'm just use that number, they should be able to say, you know what, your number is $10 to $12 million. At least we have a number that we have something to base that decision on. Because the decision to not build a standalone in recent history versus it's all come back to dollars. It's all dollars. You know, we have looked at 3 decent sites. One is right here. One is the Elks whole block there, and the other is the city land down here to the west, where we store snow, right? We own that. So those are good downtown areas there. So, but the question is, I don't know what our needs truly are for space, and I don't know what today's numbers are. I am with Bruce from the standpoint, I honestly, from everything I'm hearing, I don't think our estimates are going to be high enough. I'm concerned that what we project, once we take our steps down that path into that, I'm concerned that we're going to be coming back going, well, that came in a lot higher than we thought. And then what do we do? Right, that's where I'm at. Then where are we at? Now we're that one step farther and that noose a little tighter around our neck. So anyway, I would think JLG should be able to say X square feet, tell them what the square feet is, and they could say, for the types of spaces you're at, it's going to be between X and X. That's really no different than what we got out there right now, to be honest. So at least it gives us something to hang our hat on to say, well, that's not bad, or, well, it just doesn't work.
As far as the cost goes, with JLG, I would leave that to our city manager or our public works director. And then I'll pass it off to Councilman Vilhauer. But I guess the important word for me in what you were saying was when you said a fictitious location, and that's just it. We don't have a location. Even the snow dump location that was explored and it didn't go anywhere. Yes, we own it, but the same downtown people who want to keep it downtown also want their snow removed right away. And we heard from Rob and the street department that the extra cost of taking the snow to a different location would be several $1,000s at every snow event just to drive the snow from where it's at now, which is very close, to a different location. So every single event would be thousands of dollars. That adds up over time. And then you also have the added time to just clear the downtown area, which has been important. So as far as, and I just mentioned that about that snow dump site because it was looked at. Councilman Vilhauer, I'm sorry.
No, thank you, Mayor. I guess I've got a question for either Manager Mack or Director Von I. I mean, the estimates, and again, yes, they are estimates, but I mean, obviously, we're not just pulling those out of the air. I guess because I asked the exact same question, Councilman Danforth, when I saw these estimates. Okay, are we going to have an ice arena situation with these estimates? So I guess I'd like some explanation as to how those estimates were arrived at. I'm not questioning them, but I guess I would like to know how they were arrived at, just in general.
Councilman Paulson, you had an explanation or what?
Well, is that not the number that Heath just described to us, that we added the 2 million?
I know, I'm just asking, how were they arrived there, or where did they come from, though?
Heath can explain it more eloquently than I can, but basically the Wells Fargo numbers are based off the hard bid. The street facility, our estimates, we asked them to estimate very conservatively and then bump it up some because we didn't want to get into an ice arena situation. But they are based off of other projects that JLG is working on currently of similar natures.
So we were working with professionals that know the business that came up with these estimates. I mean, that's the point I'm trying to make here. I mean, that we're not winging it as staff coming up with those estimates.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. The estimates came twofold. Again, from JLG and RJM. So not only the architect and their design professionals, but also the people that build these things, that buy the materials, that pay for the labor. So RJM and JLG got together and provided these estimates to us. The estimate that I mentioned a minute ago about the new building, that was also provided by JLG, but months prior to these recent estimates. So that additional $2 million that Councilman Paulson just referenced that I talked about a few minutes ago was the estimate about 6 months ago for us to build a new city hall based on 21,000 square feet. The Wells Fargo remodel, going back to the square footage, that would have been a total of about 21,000 square feet. The current facility is about 18. We would have been adding about 3,000 for a new council chambers, so 21,000 square feet. JLG, they go through a series of program assessments for our operations. They really make sure they're right sizing the square footage, the work areas, the layouts, the workflow. We did get as far in the street facility design of sitting down with the street division staff, talking about their work needs, the shop space for equipment storage, repair bay needs and repair bay space needs for not only the street equipment but eventually the full city fleet of vehicles and equipment. So they did a thorough assessment of that, and we had a good running start of what the street facility square footage needs would be. We're basing our City Hall square footage based on where we're at now in this building and the Wells Fargo building at that 18,000 square foot level. They would, if we amend our contract with them and they proceed with adding City Hall to the street facility, they'd go through that exact same assessment, make sure that 18 to 21,000 is exactly what we need. There may be some more efficiencies gained to where they can do the whole facility, City Hall, street admin, for 21,000 square feet. So long story short, yes, the design professionals have helped us establish these estimates, both the ones that I presented tonight on these slides and then also the one that we had some months back related to a new facility.
Yeah, Councilman Beeler?
Just a comment, what I've heard in discussions like with Dick Strasberg, square footage, I don't know what you're hearing, but they're looking at $400 to $450 a square foot. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah.
And I think, just so everybody knows too, that when we look at City Hall, I think the intention was to have maybe 3 to 5 people working in the whole second level in the basement area. So there's plenty of room, we felt, for expansion down there. So as far as size-wise goes, the Wells Fargo has, I believe, plenty of room for us and for growth.
If I could chime in on the cost per square foot, yes, that 400, it depends on the space. So these recent estimates we got from JLG, I don't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but we had a heated vehicle storage space cost at $250 a square foot. Again, that's a rough guess. Office space at $350 to $450 a square foot. Council chambers at $500 to $550 a square foot. Again, obviously the nicer the finishes for the portion of the building, you go from vehicle storage to office space to council chambers. The price per square foot does fluctuate, but they have gone up significantly in the past couple of years.
All right. Good, Councilman? Okay. Okay, I will consider that. Oh, sorry, Councilman Tupper?
So is it a fair assumption to all of us that the longer we wait on this, the less chance we're going to get good bids? Is that a fair assumption? So why?
I would, well, I don't know construction well enough. All I know is that costs are definitely not coming back down.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. The fair assumption is the sooner we move on it, the cheaper it's going to be. Maybe that's the easiest way to put on it.
Councilman Paulson?
Well, I would. The bad bid portion, I was saying no to. I think.
What do you mean?
I mean, I don't know. There's a difference between a bad bid and inflated, with inflated costs over just rising costs in general. And yes, the longer you wait, obviously the price goes up with the cost of living just goes up. That's why we give COLA raises every year. But no, right now we're in such a price fluctuation. We don't know from day to day. Like iron is really high or steel's really high one day, and then wood was really high just a little bit ago, and now it's kind of came back down to more reasonable costs, and so you just don't know right now. I think it's starting to flatten out a little bit, but we're still recovering from COVID, to be honest, in the market, and it's just never going to come back down to where it was. But yeah, if we wait 3 more years, you'll probably double. I mean, maybe not double, but I bet you it'll be a significant increase, just like the ice arena.
So my point to that question is, how long would we bid Wells Fargo? We rejected those, 6 months ago, probably?
July is when they were rejected.
What makes us think that if we go out for rebid, it's gonna be better than what it was 6 months ago? There's not a lot of realistic consideration to that. I mean, I just don't think, unless we just chop it apart I don't think you can put enough valued engineering into it to think you're going to get a better bid that's going to make the big difference.
So I will just, for our sake, consider talk of a new alternate downtown location over, and we're now talking about the bid or Wells Fargo. So Councilman Beeler, I know you had something to say about this. I guess I will ask the council, I want to make it clear when the term is used bad bid, what is meant? Is it just that it's a high bid? Because if you think that it's an improper bid, that's a different conversation than an inflated bid, okay? A bid coming in higher than what we wanted it is just an inflated bid. A bid that you think is somehow improper, inaccurate, however corrupt, incompetent, however you want to say it, we'll call that a bad bid, okay? So just for the sake of the council, inflated bid, bad bid.
My word is
Yeah.
inflated bid.
Okay.
I would just suggest not using bad bid.
Yeah, okay, how about,
Personally.
do you have an alternate?
Just bid. I honestly don't use bad bid because we do have a bid. Don't try to.
And we do
Go
have to be
against
very careful
contractors.
because we are working with
use
these
that.
contractors, with these engineers. We want to have a good relationship with them. None of us want to besmirch their reputation or to say in any way. And the same thing with our staff. So I really want to caution the council, if you're going to say that the bid for Wells Fargo is inaccurate or incompetent or whatever, just be very careful of how you're talking about, because these are real people who put together this bid in good faith, unless you're going to argue that it was not in good faith.
And on that same note, Mayor, a lot of effort goes into a bid. Whether it was done fast, if you didn't get a lot of quotes from subcontractors, there's still a lot of time and effort put into each bid. And that's why I'm just saying don't use bad bid, because there's real time and money in putting in numbers.
Okay, we'll say inflated bid, bid. Councilman Beeler.
Thank you. I certainly don't think it was a bad bid.
Okay.
Okay, I think it was a good bid, but my concern is that the environment at the time, and if some of the subs had to bid that very hastily. You know, we're relying on the contractor to tell us that he got it bid out. Did he wait till 0 hour to get those bids in? Colin, you know that if those things come down the pipe and you got to have them the next day, chances are you're going to inflate them. So I'm not saying it's a bad bid. We rejected the bid. We thought it was ridiculously high. Again, when I walk through that building and I look at all the things we want to do, I can't believe it could cost $3.45 million in the main building. It just blows my mind. But, to Randy's point, I think, Randy, one of the concerns we have to have is, right now, that building, the architecture's done. I mean, we can make some tweaks and we can move in that. We could start working on that baby tomorrow if we had contractors. So we're not going to see that. But when we're going to have to go through that whole architecture process again. We're going to have to pay the fees all over again to include that portion of that with the city street department. That's a couple $100,000 we just kind of pitch out the window, and that might not seem much to some folks, but I think that's a fair chunk of change when it's taxpayer money. And so that project is going to get pushed out a ways, and by the time, because we saw this, folks, we saw it happen with the ice arena. We get out there too far, and all of a sudden, well, sorry guys, I know we told you that was going to be 26, but now it's 36 million. That's my concern. And yeah, Randy, I mean, but honestly, if we'd have done this thing, if we'd have gotten that big when we said we were gonna, we could have got in there for probably less than a couple $1 million. Anyway, that's all it's.
Yes, but a question as far as what Councilman Beeler said, or? Okay, but no, that Councilman Tupper was going to be recognized next.
I totally agree with you, Mr. Bueller. That's what we've had a tendency of doing, is kicking the can down the road way too many times on too many projects in this community. And it ends up costing us so much money. I guess to my point, what I was trying to get at is if now we wait for another bid, how long is it? Let's say we were to go out for bid for Wells Fargo again. What do you think a timeline would be? If we just bid it the way it was.
I mean, if we bid it as designed, that could happen rather quickly. I think we had the original bid open for longer than we normally would, so it'd be 4 or 5 weeks of bidding. So 6 weeks or so, all said and done. But that's if we're bidding it as it was designed. If you're wanting to make changes to that, we would also have to amend our contract with TSP to design those changes, whatever those might be, and that'll add however much time. I don't know what their workload is or where they would be on that.
I guess that's the point that I'm trying to get to is if it's a couple months, it's not a huge deal. But we better be ready to act the other direction if those bids come in at the same point of what they did or higher and not significantly lower to avoid that can being kicked down the road, because we're just going to pay it at the other end. So,
just as a note of clarification for anyone watching or the public, is City Manager Mack just said as proposed. So what we asked to be bid was vetted by staff, the then mayor, and Councilman Vilhauer and Councilman Bueller, as well as our architects and engineers that we had hired. So that's where that proposal came from, just as clarification. Councilman Danforth?
Colin, I got a question for you, because you're closer to this than us. So if we look back, let's say over the last year or 2 years, and we put a percentage on that increase, whatever that increase is, how much of that increase do you think is labor versus how much is the material cost? So if we looked at that and said it went up $100, whatever that is it 20% of that is labor and 80% is materials? Do you have just a rough idea?
It's pretty hard, to be honest, to put an exact number on it like that. In the last 2 years, you're probably seeing more increase in material than labor, but labor is also skyrocketed because people are realizing they have to pay more to keep the individuals. I mean, we have, especially with the extremely low unemployment rate, I mean, to even get people to come to you, we're paying people way higher than we were 2 years ago, just to even have them on staff. So obviously that adds to your overhead. That adds a lot of costs in general. But the material costs, like we said, is skyrocketed, but then all of a sudden they'd come back down or they'd flatten out. So personally, in the last 2 years, I'd say materials probably overrode payroll a little bit, but to be fair today, I'd say 50-50.
And the reason why I asked that question is we had the opportunity to walk through, Bruce and I and Mayor and Amanda and Heath and is it Tad, I think, from the, I can't think if there's anybody else or not, but and we went through the Wells Fargo building with the intent of I needed to physically see the building and have him explain what all was being done. And I'm like Bruce, I looked at that and went, it just doesn't make any sense. The number doesn't make any sense. Because most of that, setting aside the addition, okay, most of that was labor. There's very little material change in that building. A few walls here or there, we're cutting some walls, we're putting some paint in, we're changing light bulbs. We're changing out Cat 5 for Cat 6, which I've talked to, and that's not a big deal. and it's a $3.5 or $4 million project on the inside, and there's like no materials. Very little material. And that's the part that just blows me away on where we're at with that project. It just doesn't seem realistic. Not bad, but it just doesn't seem like a realistic number. And that's where I'm stuck. I'm stuck on, I'm not against the joint facility, but I can't get past the numbers over here at Wells Fargo. And until I'm able to get past that, I'm struggling to support the other facility as the first option.
Councilman Villauer?
Thank you, thank you, Mayor. Question for either Manager Mack or Director Von Eye concerning a rebid. Okay, let's say that we do, okay, you said a rebid as designed is not that time consuming. I think I heard that general, I mean.
Generally, yeah, I wouldn't, it's designed, you know, so we
Okay.
can.
And as far as the extra cost that TSP would charge us for that rebid, any idea? We have any idea what that would be?
The extra cost I was talking about was if there were additional design.
Right.
Right, so as far as managing the bid process, I'm not entirely for sure.
Well,
Yeah, there would be an additional cost. It'd be in the tens of thousands, 15 maybe, I'm guessing, for bid phase.
well, if amending the contract with JLG is a critical next step, could we not amend that contract and at the same time have TSP rebid the Wells Fargo? In other words, keep our options open as far as which route we want to go. If the Wells Fargo rebid comes in significantly lower, now we're going to have to define what significantly lower is. But if that does come in significantly lower, I mean, we haven't committed ourselves to anything yet other than the contract with JLG in the meantime for a combined facility. I mean, isn't that a possibility?
From my standpoint, I would say yes, it is.
Yes, yeah, I mean, you could do those in tandem with one another if you wanted to.
I am not in favor of going in and a total redesign of the Wells Fargo. I mean, gosh, we spent, what, Bruce, 5-6 months in the design, going through that and meeting week after week after week. That I'm not in favor of a redesign of the Wells Fargo building after what we've gone through already with that.
No, I would concur. I agree. I think what we were looking at is just another walkthrough to look at some places where you could value engineer it, make a few changes. Some things that they suggested that we put in that we might not have to. You know, again, the roof, the electrical panel, the electrical, some of those things that there's a pretty good price tag attached to them. I just, that's all I meant. I didn't mean going through and doing a redesign. We were looking at office space in the basement even, that we didn't know that was really even necessary to have that in the basement. In the lower level, that those are 3 places that we wouldn't have had to put in. But that's what I meant when we're talking about walking through there. Even if we didn't do that, Glenn, again, I would say when I look through, and Mike would agree, I'm sure, it's unbelievable it could cost that much, you know. But to rebid and maybe concurrently we keep JLG working on that project, while TSP, if we had to work with them. On this project, if we did look at doing that, and maybe it takes a walkthrough with some of us very soon to say, again, with the architect, we had questions for TSP we couldn't get answers to when we walked through that facility. But I just want to, if I could, point something out in the bid. How much was the bid for paint? This is just an example of what we got for a bid. It was over $100,000.
Yeah, 107,000.
And that's mostly wood in that place. Just pointing that out.
If I could, just make one comment to that. Again, that is a bid number that only rebidding will produce a new number, short of removing surfaces we want painted. Only rebidding will change that number. I just wanted to make that point clear.
Councilman Paulson has been waiting for a moment. Councilman Paulson.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to caution on this whole rebid process. This is a dangerous game to play. We've already rejected one because it was high. Rejecting bids is frowned upon, obviously, because this is a public bid process. In this industry, it's just obviously people understand too. There's a general understanding that if it's outside the budget, but at the same time, if we go out for bid and it comes back slightly higher and we reject it again, it's going to look really poorly upon all of us. And so I do kind of want to caution you guys on that too, because like I said, this was real effort. Whether it was hastily done or not, he still put numbers to it, because I'll tell you, sometimes you don't get quotes that you want, and sometimes you just kind of have to put a number in there, and usually it backfires actually for the general contractor. It has for us on several occasions, and you end up eating that cost because obviously your bid was too low. And that's, I really struggle with rebidding this, because if it comes back even higher or even the same cost and then we reject it again, and especially if it's the same bidder and we reject twice, I don't know if we'd get another bid from them forever. And that only hurts us in the future too. So that's one thing, but then I would also caution trying to value engineer too much. This is a facility that we want to last a very long time, and not doing the roof, not doing the HVAC, not doing the windows, that's great in theory to save us money up front, but that will have to be done in the future. And that's real money, that's real dollars, and it's going to cost more in the future too. You know, an estimate on the HVAC system, for example, was $800,000. Yeah, it might be fine now, but it's a 50-year-old system for the most part. And as soon as that goes out, it has to be replaced immediately. Not only for comfort, but for safety reasons for our staff. You know, you're not going to let them freeze to death or be 800 degrees in the office. So that's also what really I'm struggling with this, because we can value engineer, we can get it down. I mean, there was a whole slide on trying to value engineer, and yeah, sure, we can save $2 million pretty easy, but is that the building we really want or want going into the future? And that's where I struggle really hard on this.
City Manager Mack.
I have a question, because I'm not quite tracking the rebid discussion. Could you pull up the valued engineering slide, Heath, just so we're all looking at the same information? When we're discussing rebidding, are we talking about submitting as it was 7-8 months ago, or are we saying staff go to TSP, take this list of things that we've identified as potential valued engineering items, so the roof, the bathroom remodel, data package, storage, AV tech, all of these things, go to TSP, have them remove that from the design and then bid it? Because those are two different things. And I just want to make sure that if that's the direction the council wants to go with rebidding, that we're doing it the right way, that you intend us to do.
I would just say, City Manager Mack, first off, in this discussion, I think it's clear where, yes, at the end, if the council directs you as a group, but it's okay to specify a certain council person for having an idea.
Well, I mean, that's Bruce has brought that up, but I think generally we all want to be on the same page about what a rebid would look like. And if we're going to ask TSP to remove these things and others, whatever that might be, in my opinion, I'm not an architect or an engineer, I would consider that partially redesigning the facility. and that's okay. Again, I'm asking for clarity so that whenever consensus is reached, we can go deploy staff and do what it is you want us to do.
Councilman Villauer?
Manager Mack, I mean, when I said rebid without a redesign, I mean exactly that exactly the way it was bid before. But Councilman Paulson, you raise a very good point, though. I mean, we had this concern before when we rejected the bid the last time around. If we go out, do this again, and reject it again, I hate the thought of doing that to these contractors that are submitting a bid in good faith. But as to your question, Manager Mack, I mean, it's to me to bid it exactly like it was bid before.
I don't want to interrupt if anyone else wants to speak. Okay. Councilman Danforth?
Thank you, Mayor. If this were a business decision and not a city business decision, if this was us as a business, and if I was the head of this business to make I wouldn't personally go out for a full rebid, not as my first step. The first thing I would do is clearly understand why things are being requested to be bid and included in this building. Bruce made the comment that we asked a lot of questions, and we did, as to why, what on our tour, and we didn't get answers on most cases. And to me, that's a red flag. Our architect does not know, and I get it, they hire other engineering disciplines and such, but we couldn't get answers as to why a lot of the stuff, the bigger items, were even being considered for replacement or being bid. And that's a red flag to me. So what my suggestion is, I don't think we go out for a whole rebid. I think we look at the detail within the bid, and we break it down, and we say, okay, why do we need to spend X thousands or hundreds of thousands or whatever that number is on that? And let's focus on that item, and let's go sit down with somebody, give us an estimate. We're not going to bid. We're going to get an estimate. We do this all the time with equipment. We have these same discussions on equipment. That's how our staff come up with their budget numbers. They say, hey, Mr. Butler, what's a new whatever going to cost me? I'm not sure how this differs from that. Go ahead, Kyle.
Legally, we can't do that, Mike.
Yes, we can.
We can't, not if it's a full project, because we
Nope.
have only $100,000.
Getting an estimate. We're not getting a bid. And then, once we get an estimate, no different than we would, Mr. Butler, give me an estimate of what I should put in my budget for a payloader. We do that all the time. That's what I'm asking for, is to go out, do it on that basis, and say, what do you think? What's your best guess what this is going to cost us? It's not a bid. But then if we get a number, and let's just say one of them or a couple of them are here, and we invite them, I don't care. I don't care how many come in. And they go, you know what? That paint's not $100,000. I can do that for 30 grand. Now we know. Now we know at least something a lot closer than if they come back and say I can do that for 95. Well, cross that one off. We aren't going to make any dollars there. That's what I would do. I would get my key cost indicators in there, and those are the ones I'd focus on to see if we can get estimates that are, let's just say, current. Okay? They're not bids. But it would then, if we had enough of that, we could then go and say, we are justified to go out for bid. And we would. Can I ask one last question before that? Have we ever had this building professionally inspected? We're building, nope, the Wells Fargo, have we ever had a commercial business building inspector come in and inspect that building?
I can't speak to that.
The architects are licensed professionals that thoroughly inspected it through the design phase, is my response to that. I don't know if you're meaning to a different degree or a different capacity or what, Councilman
Heath,
Danforth.
and here's where I'm coming from. I couldn't get answers out of the architect when we asked him why.
Yeah, I think
That really bothers me.
Yeah, if I could expand on that, I think it's because the exact reason you cited, he's working with a team, so he doesn't know the HVAC system. He's their structural engineer for the architectural company. So we didn't have the whole team in the room. Had we had the whole team in the room, I think we could have got all those questions answered.
So did the whole team come through and jointly do an inspection on that building?
Absolutely.
They all did?
Every component that was designed, that professional was there to do an inspection on those components they were designing. Absolutely.
We worked with, 10, 12 different people.
Yeah, it was extensive.
Through the design phase of that building, from TSP.
Councilman Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. I fully respect and see where Councilman Danforth is coming from on that. From a private business perspective, 100%. I would do the same exact thing. But from a public perspective, we're restricted on bids. It's a public bid process. Getting those quotes, I get that would give us more background saying, yeah, that really inflated number, it doesn't make sense. But ultimately, a bid is a bid. And we couldn't say, let's say we got another bid after getting all these quotes. It would just show us the difference in numbers. And most of them are going to be higher because it's a bid process. And we would still have to either accept it or reject it, not based on the quotes. So, and also the time effort by our staff to do that would be astronomical. And that's what I would be worried about too, is I'm not saying it's not a good idea. Like I said, I fully respect the idea, but I think it's harder on the public side.
City Manager Mack?
I'm thinking out loud and I'm learning at the same time because I walked into this project sort of midstream. But if I remember correctly, when I started, we had already, the city, the design was pretty well set. And at that point, they were generating estimates for the facility. So paint, HVAC, whatever goes into that. And prior to bidding this project, we came back to council and presented where we were at, because at that point in time, there was maybe some division on if you even wanted to bid it. And at that time, asked the council to authorize an additional $1 million in funding for it, because the estimates were already, at that time, again, estimates were showing that they were about $1 million over what we had budgeted. So my concern with doing that is we end up right back at the same place that we're at today, because estimates are what they are. They're estimates, and we can't say, Joe Painter, you quoted us $30,000, but you bid $90,000. We're obligated to award the bid. We can't base our decisions off of what quotes or estimates are. But again, that's what you direct us to do. We'll figure out how to do that. I do think that maybe there's some confusion about the bid laws. We can bid individual components. That becomes cumbersome and is a little challenging. We can go bid the HVAC. We have to bid it. We can't quote it. We can go bid painting. We can bid plumbing or whatever those things are. But you're then coordinating, a lot of different moving parts. We can't go get an estimate for paint that's $50,000 and say, okay, go do the paint, and then an estimate for plumbing that's $25,000. Okay, you go do that, and then we get an estimate for windows that's $100,000, because then we are collectively over the bid limits for the project. So I maybe didn't explain that well enough the first time we talked about it. We can individually bid things, but they have to be bid. We can't just say, hey, Joe, will you paint this? Give us a quote for paint and award it if the collective project is more than $100,000.
And City Manager Mack, before I go to Councilman Tupper, just to clarify, because I'm totally with Councilman Danforth, and private business, public entity, very frustrating, because I still have a private sector brain, and it's hard for me to get my head around sometimes how government has to work because of laws. But also you have the situation, if you individually bid certain things, let's say you bid plumbing and you bid carpet, well, and then you also bid painting. Well, you're not going to have the painter come in, okay, you're not going to lay carpet and then have the painter come in and spill paint on the carpet, and then you're also not going to have a plumber come in after you do the carpet, because then they have to rip up the carpet. So the coordination of it is something, that's why a public entity goes to a construction manager, because someone has to coordinate all of the separate components of any.
Yeah, whether it's
Build or
through a
renovation.
general contractor or construction manager at risk, or they're doing all of that work coordination, and coordinating with the architects and the fire department on fire suppression. All of those pieces, it's their responsibility to ensure that when they deliver the product to us at the end, are checked off and done to code, and are to the satisfaction that we want it to be. Heath can provide more detail to that.
Yeah, I agree completely with those comments about separating the bid out. You lose what I like to refer to as somebody orchestrating that work. But not only that, you also lose the person that's going to be responsible at the end of the day when the contract's done, when the project's complete. Who scuffed this wall? Who broke that light? Who did, you don't have that general contractor to go to that would be responsible for all those subcontractors. I liken it to a piece of equipment bid. We don't do those. We don't go bid a plow and bid a chassis and bid a sander box. We bid the whole unit as one, and we go through one vendor for that whole unit so they can build it for us. A lot of people don't realize those parts all come separately to that company that we're buying it through. But we do it in a joint venture, so that one company we're buying it through, whether it be Butler Cat or Titan or whoever, they're the ones responsible to make sure we got the right plow, we got the right chassis, we got the right sander box. Just one simple example in relation to the equipment analogy.
Councilman Tupper, thank you for waiting.
I got to think, and I think we're going down a slippery slope by looking at trying to piece things together, because you're going to have a situation in the community of Watertown where you have no contractors want to deal with us. You have a general contractor for a reason, and that's a lot what Mr. Von Eye just stated. I would say that we go out for a bid just the way it is, because we can always do the value engineering afterwards. We need to see what the cost is compared to what it was. Maybe it comes in $1 million less, and we got to do a little less value engineering, and we get some of that. But I would caution this council not to start picking apart bids and say we're going to go find a painter and we're going to go find this guy and we're going to go find this guy, because pretty soon we're going to have a project that we need to do, and we will not get a bid from a general contractor. They will not want to do business with Watertown, because all we're going to do is pick apart what their job really is. So that would just be my caution to the council, and to really give it a lot of thought before they go that direction.
I guess, yeah, my issue is, I mean, I'm with you. We could ask someone, like how much would it cost to paint this? And they could tell us, but in the end, it would still be the bid that we would have to take or reject. So the original estimate that we went out to bid for was based upon best information that the staff had. So, yeah, I'm not against you in that it could be less, but in the end, some guy just telling you, oh, I could do that for a lot less. In the end, it just comes down to what they bid. So, which then you get into, do you separate the bids? Yeah. And as far as like taking it out to bid, I'm not exactly sure how I would feel on that, because I would not oppose it, but I do think it is a very questionable message to send to the community, because this is a public meeting and anyone who would potentially bid this is going to watch this and know that what we're doing is essentially floating a trial balloon. And I know how I would react to that, not favorably. City Attorney Carrico.
Thank you, Mayor. Believe it or not, I'm indifferent, so I wouldn't want to be in your shoes of trying to decide. But I heard a lot of stuff about cost, and I just wanted to report, as someone who has just recently been on the utility board, which is a sub-entity of this city, and every month we go over bids, and they are not coming in any better than they were a year ago. Don't get me wrong, not every bid is extremely high, not every bid. There are a couple of bids that have come in lower than when we bid it out a year ago. But kind of going to Councilman Paulson's comment, it is drastically fluctuating. We have rejected bids because they were too high. We bid them a year later, and they came back just about the same. Depending on, we've also had issues with delivery. When the materials can get here. And so I guess my point is at least from a public entity standpoint, because we're talking about bids that have to be brought in, we're not seeing any true reduction overall in the bids from when we were bidding out this stuff a year ago to 2 years ago. We get excited now if they're only up like 10% over or 15% over. We get very excited. Mostly, though, they're coming in at anywhere from 20 to 60. We've even had some that were 100%. And then we have to make a choice of whether or not to reject the bids. Granted, those are only materials, because we're only talking about, bids for materials. And again, it's a different animal because we're not constructing a building. But this is just a report from your own sub-entity, and I just thought I'd put that out there.
Thank you. Councilman Bueller.
Thank you, Mayor. If it's this council's desire not to rebid this project, then it's a moot point. That means we're not going to go into the Wells Fargo building, because we'd have to rebid it if we decided we wanted to do that.
It's a really good point. So, we can't vote on it. Not sure if. We can put it on a future agenda for actual vote if that's what you want. I guess that's a question for the council. Should we put a rebid on a future council agenda? And that way, at least at that point, we would be voting for or against a rebid. Councilman Danforth?
Mayor, a week from now, I think it's a week from this tonight, I think, isn't it? That we're having the public input meeting on this whole issue. I think we need to base probably a decision on that meeting, after that meeting, because here's the question I have. For those that have a strong sense that it needs to stay downtown, okay, versus being a joint facility. And if it's downtown, is it new, or is it Wells Fargo remodel, right? That's our choices. But for those people that have a strong sense of that, and of the people that have contacted me and talked to me, and I've probably had 10, 12 people that have stopped me and talked to me or whatever. I've had one that was adamant that it goes out to the joint facility. I've had probably 4, 5, 6 that were saying it needs to stay downtown. The others have been just very neutral, to be honest. It's kind of all over the place. But the strong opposition to this is going to come from those that are adamant in strong belief that it stays downtown. So my question is in having that conversation with them, knowing what we've talked about tonight, right? What the cost of the Wells Fargo is, the issues are there, what the cost of new is, X dollars, whatever that is, what's their suggestion? If they want it to be downtown, can we afford it? Can we afford it? And we can't just say we want it downtown without having an answer to how that's going to occur. What does the public want? Because really, that's what we're making a decision on. What do they want? And how do we do it? And I think we've got to hear that. We got to have these numbers and such at our meeting next week. I think we need public input as to how we get there then, and not just say it needs to be there. That's an easy one to say. How do we make it happen? So to answer your question, I think I'd be in a better position, Mayor, to tell you what I think we need to do after next Tuesday, in my opinion.
Councilman Beeler?
I agree, thanks. But again, if we don't bid this, we're out of it. We're not going in the Wells Fargo building, period.
Yeah, in agreement. Councilman Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, that's kind of what my point was at the beginning, is the public feedback is what's driving this. Because, yeah, we can all have our personal views, but the people in the audience are the people that matter, and that's whose voice we represent. So I absolutely agree that on next Tuesday we're going to hear. But the problem right now we're facing is one group's going to outweigh the other, because we see it in every council meeting that only people that are against something come out in full force, and we're not seeing the people who support it come out, because they tell you not in a council meeting that they support it, but then they won't come to a council meeting on public record. And I've seen it over and over on almost every vote we do. That's controversial, is the people that are angry are here screaming at us, not screaming, sorry, at letting their opinion be known. And the people that I'm hearing from that support it are either texting me, or I see them in person, or they're just not here. And so I'm going to caution that is next Tuesday we're going to see a lot of people against it. I guarantee it. And their voice absolutely matters, and we have to take that into account. But one meeting doesn't mean that that's the sentiment of the whole town. I'm just saying, because we see it over and over again.
And I don't want to take the mic away from anyone else, but I think anyone who's been in an elected position, or not even that, I mean, a position, you could be on a church board. I remember being on a church board, and you certainly heard from all the people against something, and a lot of the people for something might tell you in private, but they don't want to stand up for it because they don't want to be called out. Or I'm not saying that's always the case or anything like that, but I don't think you're wrong in saying that. Councilman Villauer, did you have something?
No, I'm just saying too. I agree with Councilman Danforth here that I hear what you're saying. I don't disagree with you. Same thing, Mayor. But I would feel better on trying to make a decision on a Wells Fargo rebid after next Tuesday evening, and just see what we are hearing, because I'm hearing something different than what you're hearing, Mike, and we're all hearing those that want to reach out to us and maybe want to agree with us, but you're right about it. So I would feel better about making a decision after next Tuesday.
I could venture a subject. I'm not saying, from our one public hearing that we have had, a lot of people just said that they felt that City Hall needed to be downtown. And I'm not saying that that was emotional. It was maybe traditional, maybe emotional, maybe just they felt it was the proper place. That's a legitimate argument. Does the council feel, I mean, I'm not saying, do you feel likewise? And also, if, let's say if the numbers are the same, how much is emotion or feelings worth? Councilman Paulson?
I also kind of want to point out that a rebid process might be moot in the first place if we would just pick a position. It's going to cost a lot either way. Whether we go downtown or stay downtown or go out to Highway 20, honestly, I think we just have to make that decision and move forward with it. And obviously next Tuesday we're going to know, but we just had a whole hour-long discussion about rebidding. It might not matter at all. I mean, really, I mean, yeah, and I'm not saying either way. I'm just saying we have, our decision is where the location is, because money is what it is. And I know we have a member that pointed out $1 million isn't, in the grand scheme of things, isn't going to mean much. And that's kind of where I'm at, is we just need to make a decision one way or the other, if it's staying downtown or if it's going to Highway 20. And that might make the decision of rebidding moot, is my point.
Councilman Tupper.
You know, there's a lot of strong emotions, I think, when you talk about people that are wanting to keep it downtown. And I understand those. But we look at the history of our downtown. At one time there was 5 banks. You look at the history of downtown, at one time there was 4 grocery stores. 2 hardware stores. Traditions don't always live out. You know, you look at Wells Fargo's empty for a reason. Wells Fargo didn't feel that it was important to be downtown anymore. We have 1 grocery store downtown. We don't have a hardware store downtown. Traditions sometimes tend to change, and that's where we need to take the emotions out. Would I like to see City Hall stay downtown? Absolutely. Does it make sense to stay downtown? I don't know anymore. I don't think that tradition of City Hall having to be in the heart of downtown is as much a need as it is an emotional tradition trying to keep that alive. I mean, there's a lot of things that have changed in downtown. I don't think by City Hall leaving downtown is detrimental to the continued growth of downtown. I mean, and we've all talked about, you know, why do the banks move down or from downtown? Because people don't use them anymore. People use electronic banking. They don't come to City Hall like they used to. Like I say, would I like to see it stay downtown? Absolutely, but I don't think it's as much a necessity as it is an emotional decision where we're trying to keep the old tradition alive. So, thank you.
Sorry about that, Councilman. Councilman Danforth?
Yeah, again, thank you, Mayor. A couple things. First of all, next week's meeting. I was not here when you had the last public meeting, so I don't know exactly what level of detail was provided at that point. You know, it may be, it is one of the things that have been asked on occasion, and that is, okay, so we put it out there, whatever that is, but what are we actually getting? We said we're getting this building, we're getting that, but what is that building? Is that are we putting up a metal building? You know, we got 3, 4 buildings. What are they? I think we have to go into a little bit higher level of detail to understand, so that the people understand what they're getting if we go out there. That's just 2 cents. In regards to the site, all things equal, and if money was not an issue, that is not where I'd put a city hall. I'm perfectly fine. It's a great spot for the city street department. It is. It's a great use of that land. I don't think it represents well. Look around it. I mean, for a city hall, you know, look to the south, and those are good businesses here, but the area isn't developed in a manner that is conducive to making anything that supports that building visually. So you're talking about image, and I know, Mary, you'd said that before. It's not the image. Okay, that really isn't, to be honest with you. The standalone building's fine, I guess, you know, if it's with the street department, but their area around it isn't conducive to that building image-wise, from my standpoint. Why I can support it, if we don't go the Wells Fargo way, is purely the opportunity. And the opportunity is based on cost savings. So it's all about dollars. So if we're talking about a $2 million difference between building out there and building down here, I'd find a place down here and do it. If that's really what the community wants, that's what I would do. Because, Colin, you're right. What's $2 million if we're talking about a building for the next 75 or 80 years, right? At that point, do it the way you want to do it, where the public, and I'm going to say where the public wants it, don't know what that is, but wherever that's at. And I'm a very conservative individual. For me to just say, let's wing up another $2 million here somewhere, that's just kind of not my way here. But looking at the whole thing, all things considered, we need to hear what the public has to say. We need to be able to afford it. I don't exactly know what that number is. It comes down to prioritization. Maybe there's something that doesn't go into the city street department right away. Maybe that comes 2 or 3 years down the road, one of those buildings, and that's what enables us. Because we talked about that. Amanda, I had asked you, what do we do if this thing comes in over budget? And we said we'd cut out probably some building and delay that, right?
Right, and the financial phasing allows for that. So there are buildings that are planned in subsequent years that if it comes in over, we don't do them.
We push them
right
out.
now. We push
right?
them out. Yep.
So that's also an option, is to reprioritize some of those in relationship. Let's just use the $2 million number, right? We've got to decide that priority on that, and where that, whatever it is that we would have to potentially move out, reprioritize that versus if we wanted to put that extra $2 million into a downtown building, right? A new building. And I'm just saying, it's a shell game, right? It's about prioritizing. And if in the end it's by golly, we're going to do it downtown, we got two choices. You're going to renovate or you're going to build new. Otherwise, let's move on and we build a facility out there. It's a joint facility. And what did we accomplish? We got a facility.
Councilman Villauer?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess, you know, after the last public hearing, I had coffee with 4 of them that spoke out pretty adamantly that night that they were in opposition to it. Pretty good friends of mine. Out of the 4, 3 of them admitted that it was purely an emotional decision. They said, I can't argue the vision, the dollars, the cost differential, et cetera. They admit it was purely emotional. And unfortunately, we can't make a decision based upon emotions. We haven't got that luxury. I think back to the work session a couple of nights prior to that, and it's a public record. Retired Judge Vince Foley was here and talked about thinking outside the box and applauding us for doing that. And I've gotten a lot of feedback from influential people in town saying the exact same thing. Talk about site. Look at where Ice Arena is going. To talk about thinking outside the box and taking a risk with that building, a $36 million building built on a gravel pit out there. But we've got the vision to see what it could become. I see the same thing potentially with the street department facility, with a nice administrative building out there in that part of town. I see that same vision potentially happening out there. So I'm willing to listen, but I think we want to make sure that we're hearing the full spectrum of feelings within the community as far as where we build this thing.
Thank you. And since you mentioned it, vision, and Councilman Danforth, I know you didn't mean it, but you said, like, I always talk about image. Perhaps I have used that term. I'm try to stress the word vision. And when I have talked about, when this did actually come up in a council meeting, I did use the term vision because mine is not based on emotion. Emotion for me was taken out of it about last year when I tried very hard to find a downtown location and none was palatable at that time. So then I just said, okay, what's the best decision for Watertown? And I continue to go, so I'm definitely leaning towards what I view as a permanent solution. The Wells Fargo building is almost as old as I am, and I know I'm not going to be around for much longer. And I just don't think that the Wells Fargo building is either. It's a 50-year-old building. I think we're going to be putting a lot more money into it to just keep it servicing the community for another 20 years, 20, 30 years. And then, yeah, granted, that's a long time. But when you're, the argument is $2 million a big deal over the span of however much time. Perhaps not, but I guess I look at it, you can build new, which is a permanent, long-term, generational solution. And you also take away the fear or I would consider it a sure thing. I mean, you're going to have building maintenance no matter where you go, but a 50-year-old building, I think you're certain to have more in that. So that's where I'm leaning, but I'm really not emotional about this. I know that council and staff have heard me say this many times. Out in the community, most people aren't passionate about City Hall. It's because it doesn't impact them on a daily life. They don't come in, they don't visit, and I care about our staff, and I care about a permanent solution for the city that I love. That's where I come down on. Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm assuming we're just getting to the closing.
It certainly seems that way.
So I want to reiterate kind of what both of you just said is I've definitely heard way more proponents for Highway 20 than keeping it downtown, 100%. And a lot of those are business owners, influential people like you said, Glenn, and I think it's important, especially downtown business owners, to hear their input. Obviously, everyone's input's important, but the people who have invested so much downtown, and that's the discussion, is what are the thoughts there? And obviously, I haven't heard from every single one, nor I don't think any of us have. But here, my thought is new will be better. We get exactly what we want. We're not trying to retrofit. And kind of like what the mayor just said is the building maintenance and the potential hidden cost down the road. Like I said before, value engineering is one thing, but then you don't do the roof, and in 10 years you have to do the roof. And you don't do the HVAC. In 3 years, the HVAC goes out. You have to do that. That's another $1 million. I mean, it just adds up real quick. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen with new buildings because obviously there are failures that happen, but you get a lot less surprises. And Councilman Danforth mentions opportunity, and Highway 20 offers huge opportunity too. Not only for the revitalization of Highway 20 potentially. Potential to save money, potentially. That's not, like we said, I don't think that's the deciding factor necessarily. But also, there's a potential for the reinvestment of this area by other developers. That would bring huge taxes to this community. And I just think that there's a huge opportunity there that would go a long way. So, I'm wide open. I said this a few weeks ago when we had this discussion with the public, is I want to hear from more people because I want to hear the other side more than I've heard just move it down or move it. So that's where I'm sitting too.
Councilman Vilhauer.
Can I ask a question, Mayor, as far as procedurally next week? I mean, at the last public hearing, it was the most part, we sat there and listened, the public had their comments. I mean, to me, it needs to be a dialogue back and forth between the public and we as council next Tuesday. I mean, will we be situated in such a way that we can respond, or is it, again, just a matter of us, a purely listening session?
That's a great question. So the meeting will be held over at the police department community room, and we can set the room up in such a way that you all are, readily accessible to whomever is there, and however you choose to run the meeting is up to you, Mayor. Staff will be available again to answer questions. We could talk a little more detail. I'm not entirely for sure what you want us to present. If it's the whole presentation again, we certainly can do that. One of the questions that I had before the end of the meeting, is there additional information that you'd like us to prepare and be able to provide for you and for questions you might be getting out in the community on any of these scenarios? I did write down Councilman Danforth's comments about just kind of a higher level of detail of what type of buildings are we talking about, and I think we have some of that information, or we can make some assumptions about some of that information. But yeah, we'll need to know if there's any additional information that you want.
Thank you. Any further discussion? You can go ahead.
If I might, I'm certainly not an elected official, but people reach out to me and share their thoughts as well. And the people who have reached out to me have been pretty evenly split. I've had people who support it. I've had 2 business owners out on Highway 20 who really love the idea of redevelopment in that area. I've had a couple of downtown business people express thoughts that makes a lot of sense. I have had people say, I really don't care. Just whatever you do it right and get it done. I've also had people tell me that if the council goes through with this, that I'm going to be without a job. So I think it's pretty evenly divided, and I hope that doesn't happen. But to echo Councilman Vilhauer's point, I have tried to find personally, and this is my own personal thoughts on this. I've tried to find every reason possible why Highway 20 is not the right solution, and I keep coming back to that it's emotional for me. I love being downtown. I think it's cool. I like being able to walk places. It just is, but I can't advise the council based on my own emotions. We can't entirely take emotion out of whatever decisions we make because we're humans, but we shouldn't let emotion drive our decisions either, one way or the other. But I just wanted to share some of the comments that I was receiving. I think it's pretty mixed, and generally I think people, again, this is a generalization, don't care. They just would like us to deal with it, so we move on from it.
I think the term I always use is not passionate. It's not that they don't care, because they do. It's just that they're not passionate about City Hall. And you know what? By and large, operationally, if people aren't passionate about something we're doing, that means hopefully we're doing a pretty good job. So understand we're not going to skate by freely on that one, on this topic. But any other, Councilman Tupper?
Just one comment to the public that's watching. I think it was brought up both by Colin and somebody else tonight that we need to hear from the people that are either for or against this. I mean, we need to hear from you publicly also. Typically, like Councilman Paulson said, mostly when we hear people that come to a meeting, it's the negatives. but there is also a lot of positive people. And if you don't want to come to the meeting, please reach out to all of us. I mean, that's our email's publicized on the city website. We would like to hear from you within the next week before this next meeting. So we're trying to make informed decisions for the community. We can't do a very good job of it if we don't get some of that information from the community. So please reach out and touch base with any or all of us. I think we're all willing to sit down and listen. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Director Von Nye?
If in my engineering mind, if I could try to set some framework for what we're hoping to get out next week, so I can keep it straight in my mind and keep our consultants and the staff on track, is my assessment of the discussion tonight is that we're looking at potentially maybe rebidding Wells Fargo or moving forward with an addendum to the contract with JLG to design the street complex with a city hall in it, or some hybrid of both of those. So I just wanted to cite those few things from from the notes I've taken this evening. And then for whatever it's worth, I'll just add a quick bit. In over 2 decades of helping facilitate city projects, facilitate the infrastructure improvements, never have I ever seen in any community that emotion carries the day every time, or logic and objectivity carries the day every time. It's always a mix, and sometimes one wins out over the other. There's several examples right here in Watertown that have happened since I've been here in the last few years. 10th Avenue North, a lot of emotion, a lot of objectivity came into that project and was hashed out and moved forward with eventually. And I think it's a great improvement for the city now today. Take some recent zoning actions that the council had to contentiously work through. Some of them passed, some of them did not. And all were emotional and all had objectivity involved in them as well. And a huge project that we're working on again, trying to figure out how to manage stormwater runoff and prevent this community from flooding. 2 decades ago, decisions were made and emotions flared, and it got paused, and now we're trying to dust it back off. Right now, today, we're working on it again, trying to find solutions. So for whatever that's worth, I just wanted to commend you for working through this in a productive way like we have been, and continue. I have no doubt we will continue to do so. So I appreciate everybody's efforts and your guys' time and considerations and all that.
And I personally want to thank the council, the staff. In particular, we have spent a lot of time together over the last 2 nights, and I want to thank you for being civil and professional and working through to find a solution. With that, I will close the discussion on that. Open it up for public comment. The rules of Watertown say it is public comment for something that is not on tonight's agenda. So, but what I would do is if anyone here would like to come forward and say something, if you have a request for additional information for next week, that I would consider a new topic. So if you want something, if you know that it's going to be something that you want more information on for next week's public hearing, bring it forward to us so that we know right now, if you want to, yeah. And you can also comment about perhaps what procedure you would like to see next week, and you could also comment about the procedure tonight. So yeah, come forward. Just state your name and who you represent, if anybody.
Well, I don't represent anybody. I did have a question, and it has to do with the cost comparison. As you, it probably scares Mike Danforth as much as it scares me when I feel like we agree. But as you know my own position is cost. Even the difference as it is isn't big enough to outweigh the value. But as long as you're comparing, the question I have is whether the estimate of the stockyard option has built into it the traffic control changes that would need to be made. I don't recall that being discussed, but if you're talking about extending 10th Avenue across Highway 20, and any of us that drive that all the time know it's a 35 speed limit there on a curve, I assume there would have to probably be stop and go lights. So have the cost of that, is that built in, and do you know that the state would agree to have the changes made at that intersection.
Yeah, thank you for that. I know that we have looked at least partially at that, and I thought that that was in one of the original slides from the original presentation, but perhaps we haven't done a good enough job. But yes, definitely. And also the costs, I don't think that was addressed, but thank you. Any further public comment? I will close public comment. There is no reason to go into executive session tonight, therefore the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, sorry, City Manager Mack.
Just one quick announcement. We got a text message from our airport manager during this meeting that they have closed the airport due to ice. So please be careful when you are driving home tonight.
All right. Any other announcements? Okay. Motion to adjourn is made by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Beeler. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, the motion is to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries.